Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session. The Center for Responsible Business is bringing today's session as part of its 7th annual flagship Sustainable Business Conference, which is the India and Sustainability Standards 2020, in partnership with the Bharti Institute of Public Policy, Indian School of Business. This year's conference will be held virtually from the 28th to the 30th of October. In today's live, we will attempt to discuss various aspects of a forest-based economy, understanding its value chains, the challenges it faces, and the opportunities it offers. To share with us his experiences, we have today Mr. Ashwini Chhatre. He serves as the Executive Director of the Bharti Institute of Public Policy, ISB, also while serving on its faculty as an Associate Professor of Public Policy. Interestingly, he has spent 11 years working in different parts of India as a community organizer and as an activist, working on issues related to natural resources like land, forest, and water. Facilitating today's conversation is Ms. Nandani Sharma. She's Director, Center for Responsible Business, and comes with 10 plus years of experience in governance and responsible business. Nandani, may I now, I welcome both of you, and Nandani, may I now invite you to take over.
Great. Thank you so much, Shreya. A very good afternoon to everybody who's watching us on this LinkedIn Live. And we're very pleased to have Mr. Ashwini Chhatre from the Bharti Institute of Public Policy with us. And as my colleague Shreya mentioned, Ashwini comes with a vast experience and great knowledge. He is leading the sustainability initiatives at ISB. And before I invite him over to join us for this conversation, I would like to share a few facts and figures with all of you today. And this will perhaps provide a smooth segue into our conversation today on sustainable forest economy. So here goes. So as per the 2011 census, what we know is that the tribal population of India constitutes 8.6%, which is over 104 million people, and a significant percentage of these tribal people depend on forests for their livelihood and for their very existence. It is estimated that the tribal people and forest dwellers together collect about 2 trillion, that's about 200,000 crores worth of forest products every year for their sustenance, and they trade in about 20,000 crores to 50,000 crores worth of forest products. And we all know that despite their contribution, economic contribution, they remain the most vulnerable and marginalized communities. And now, as the world grapples with the consequences and the challenges that the pandemic has thrown open for us, it is becoming very clear, and more so by each passing day, that a sustainable forest economy will define the building back process. And with that, I would like now to invite Mr. Chhatre to sort of delve deeper into how and the why and the what of this whole building back process, and how the forest economy, the sustainable forest economy, is right at the heart and the center of it all. So without any further ado, may I now invite Mr. Chhatre to join us for the conversation. Over to you, Dr. Chhatre.
Thank you, Nandini. I'm delighted to be here, and certainly the questions that I look forward to are very close to my heart. This is something that I have been involved in for a long time. I only want to start with a small observation that forests have been part of economic debates recently in terms of carbon sequestration, in terms of even what is the value of the biodiversity that we lose when we let forests be destroyed. So there has always been an economic undercurrent in the discussions around forests or the role of forests. It is the people who live in or near these forests that have been missing. And my primary objective over the last 30 years or so has been to try and put the people back into conversations about forests, especially with the economic underpinning.
Absolutely. I think that's a very, very relevant point. And I think, again, very pertinent to the discussion we will have in the next 20, 25 minutes, all the things that we'll try to pack in. And maybe then the very first question to be asked, Dr. Chhatre, is what do you understand by a sustainable forest economy? What would you say are the defining aspects or the defining elements of a forest-based economy, the various dimensions to it? So over to you then.
Thank you. So the question of sustainable forest economy, again, has been around for a long time. It's just not prevalent or common in mainstream discussions. There are several elements that are critical that we cannot do without if we even want to imagine a sustainable forest economy. The first, as I already said, is the people who live in or near these forests. They have first charge on these forests, and wherever forests have been preserved, we have to credit the people who live near these forests for protecting them, or at the very least, if you do not want to be generous, for not destroying them. They must have been doing something right. It's not because of guns and fences that forests are protected. If the people who live in or near the forest are not protecting them or behaving in ways that protect the forest would have long gone. And that is exactly what has happened in the rest of the world. So any economic proposals regarding forests must take this anomaly into account, that the people who live in or near the forests should be rewarded for not destroying that forest, when actually most of the interventions hurt them more than help them. We must take them into account. And if we don't, they will destroy the forest, because then we also destroy the incentives and their intrinsic motivation and their cultural disposition to protect the ecosystems and the forests within which these ecosystems thrive. The second critical point is property rights. It's very easy to find examples, literally by the thousands, if not more, where market forces have led to perverse incentives where people tend to destroy forests, which is where the understanding of forest destroying people comes from. This is where we form the image that people destroy forests. So it's like the NRA argument, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So let's not blame the guns. It's somewhat inverse of that, is that let's not blame the people, it's the property rights. So if the people, local communities, indigenous peoples had ownership over these forests or had security of tenure, if they knew that they could count on the benefits of these forests for their children and their grandchildren, they would behave very differently. So the second element of a sustainable forest economy is clear property rights that are in favor of local communities, not individuals, not governments, because these are the only two kinds that are prevalent right now. The third, again, critical ingredient, because just these two are also not enough. The third critical ingredient is technology. And right now, forest products are being used in thousands of products that we consume as consumers, as people who go out into supermarkets and buy things off the shelf. Just like palm oil and soybean are now integrated into so many different products, so are forest products. What we don't have is visibility, and we need technology to create visible supply chains. We don't know where the forests are which supplied the products that got into my face cream or hair oil or Ayurvedic treatments and so many other ways in which we consume forests every day in cities. And just like we have built these supply chains for certification purposes, for other products that are environmentally destructive like soybean and palm oil, we need to do the same for all the other forest products. And we can do this by engaging local communities as equal partners, by giving them security of tenure, and by leveraging technology, particularly digital technology, to make these supply chains visible.
Right. Thank you so much. I think you've in part answered my next question, which is really on the challenges and, the understanding really more in a more detailed manner what the supply chain or the value chain looks like. And I know you alluded to issues or challenges on governance, on community empowerment and technology, which are challenges and opportunities in themselves. Maybe if you could talk a little bit more about some of these challenges and how perhaps there have been successful models that could be replicated, customized, or what has worked in that sense to overcome some of these challenges and turn them into opportunities.
The answer to economic questions is politics. And people like us, academics, and sometimes even activists forget that. We tend to treat politicians as untouchables. But that is where the solutions are in political economy. First, we have to understand the political economy and the way it is structured right now. And what are derogatorily called minor forest produce or products are collected, as you said, comprising a multi-trillion-dollar economy. I think the 2 trillion rupees is certainly a underestimate for India, but globally, if you look at it, it's a huge economy that already exists. It's not like we have to create something. What is not happening is price discovery, and the benefits are not captured at the local level by the people who live in or near the forests, right? And I believe the answer lies in politics, because if people benefit, then the politicians who can take credit for those benefits will gain. People will vote for them. And of course, there is a lot of fuzziness in that clean relationship. It doesn't add up perfectly all the time, always for everyone. But there are clear opportunities in several places. So for example, we use dhoop as incense. All over India, in temples, in homes, during festivals, we use agarbattis and we use dhoop. That dhoop plant comes from the root. That dhoop is manufactured from the root of a plant that grows in the alpine pastures of Himalayas, particularly in the Western Himalayas, in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. And a lot of it is extracted by local communities and sold in the market. They, of course, don't get very good prices for it, or at least they do not capture a significant proportion of the market value of that product. But strangely, most of that dhoop is exported out of Himachal Pradesh in raw form and goes somewhere else for processing, for manufacturing. And this is not sort of rocket science. You're not trying to build nuclear missiles here, right? This is just a dhoop plant that needs minimal processing that can be done. This is the kind of rural industrialization opportunities that we should be looking for, where there is minimal industrialization and manufacturing processes that are located close to where the resource is found, and benefits are therefore also sequestered in the ecosystems where the resource is generated. And this is something that we are working with the government of Himachal for, to see how we can work with industry to sort of shorten this supply chain, to keep more of the value closer to the resource and the people who own that resource and who depend on that resource. It's the same with sal seeds in Jharkhand, and we are working with the government of Jharkhand on that supply chain as well. There are hundreds of such examples. You're muted.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize this seems to be becoming a bit of a habit with me to speak on mute. Apologies. So yes, no, I thought that. Thank you so much for articulating it so well, Ashwini. Some of these, very systemic issues regarding the supply chains and what perhaps can be done. I heard you say that the idea of rural industrialization, shortening the sort of the value chain, bringing in more transparency, strengthening the market linkages, etc. And this sort of leads me to my next question. We are seeing world over that economies are struggling. There are challenges. There is this whole effort being made to revive the economy, to steady it, to and then of course the emphasis that in the rush to kind of build back, and sort of bump up the GDP figures, one should not forget sustainability. And here again, I would like to maybe ask you what role do you envisage the sustainable forest-based economy playing, and sort of how do you see this whole the forest economy sort of unfolding or playing out? How do you see their role in this entire economic revival and recovery?
Sustainability is a wicked problem, right? It cannot be solved, and anyone who says that my solution is sustainable is living in a fool's world. Nobody should be able to say that. It should be outlawed. The best we can do, because it lulls us into this complacency that, oh, now we have a sustainable solution. No, it's not. In 5 years down the line, we don't know what is going to happen. And I mean, the path to hell is paved with solutions that are sustainable, so to speak. But there are a few things that we must take care of, which are required, which are necessary, but not sufficient. And what is sufficient, we have to be just attentive to on a constant basis, because what is sufficient now may not be sufficient tomorrow. We need to understand it. But what is necessary is not going to change. What is necessary is that a set of incentives that do not persuade the users to destroy the resource, to overuse it, to overharvest it. And it has to be a combination of positive and negative incentives. It cannot be a guns and fences and I will put you in jail if you do bad things, because that doesn't work. What really works, and it is important to have negative incentives, but what really works is positive incentives and positive reinforcement. So if people have, and local communities, industry, companies, whichever economic actor we talk about, if they are better off by acting in ways that enhances the resource, the natural resource, then we can say that it will be there in the future, because people do not have an incentive to destroy it. And property rights are the best way to do it. Historically, that is what we have done. Unfortunately, we have focused too much on private property. And we think of it as private property, but I mean, that is not true. A corporation is not private property. It's actually a common property of all the shareholders, that is run on behalf of all the shareholders who hold the company in trust. It can be extended very easily. And now, I mean, there has even been a Nobel Prize in economics on the work on commons awarded to Elinor Ostrom. So there is greater recognition now that we should think of local people and local communities who live in or near forests as shareholders. And they should hold equity in the benefits that we derive from these forests. And benefits that are also derived by not using these forests. We often ask these communities to abandon these forests, to not go there, to not cut firewood, to not graze cattle, because it will benefit us or it will benefit humanity. Well, if we give them equity in these forests, then they should benefit from whatever humanity benefits from. We haven't set up the incentive systems to do that. And that creates negative incentives for people to destroy forests.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, thank you so much, Ashwini, for that response. And I think that kind of again, in part of actually quite a bit of it is sort of already leads me to my next question, which is on what would you think are some of those important action areas? What in terms of pushing forward this agenda of a sustainable. Well, I'll drop the word sustainable, but having an equitable and a more transparent and ethical forest-based economy. What would you think? You've already, of course, mentioned that politics or governance systems have an important role. Technology has an important role. But let's say if one were to prioritize and think of some of the, let's say in the next 1 or 2 years, kind of a time frame, what would you think those important action areas would be? What would then those be for you?
I think the most important action areas is for the private sector to make their supply chains visible. Because right now it stops at the contractor and they don't know where the contractor is sourcing the material from which forests, through which communities, and at what price. And the value chain is completely invisible after that. And corporations need to make the supply chain more visible, take greater ownership of the people who are supplying them, and help them in protecting the forests where the produce is extracted from. I think that is the most important area for further action right now. Similar to the ways in which sustainable supply chains have made visible, and also sort of fair trade or other chain of custody problems, such as in illegal timber, for example. We need to make forest produce supply chains more visible, and corporations should take more responsibility for the forests and the people who are collecting that produce, which they ultimately use and sell to consumers. Which of course also should then be extended to consumers, and figure out ways to be a responsible business, to take responsibility for the forests where their raw material comes from. So that's one. The second most important area of action is policy and its implementation. So already there has been a lot of work. So the government has done its bit in terms of the legislative part of it. We have a very good legal infrastructure to enable this kind of visibility and enable the kind of security of tenure that allows communities to participate with equity in these supply chains. And there are great examples of communities gaining security of tenure in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, in Odisha, and so on. The government needs to step up, and governments are stepping up already. I'm just highlighting a trend that is becoming intense and stronger. For example, Odisha and Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, all these governments are now keen to expand the ambit of the community forest rights provision in the Forest Rights Act by providing greater security of tenure and linking these communities to the markets. And we are working in several of these areas, working with the government and their agencies to help them make this transition. But the private sector has to step up now.
Right. I know we are very short on time, but I'd like to squeeze in one more question, Dr. Chhatre, and that's sort of, it takes me to your previous response, which is really about the private sector and the private sector sort of stepping, upping their game and kind of making their supply chains a lot more transparent. And here, maybe if you could talk a little bit about what is in it. I mean, I'm playing the devil's advocate, but what is in it for the businesses? Why should they? They've been, it's not that the forest economy has only emerged now. It's probably one of the oldest industries, and if things have been working this way, I'm just wondering what is their incentive to change the way, to sort of rejig the whole system and change the way they're doing businesses. now. So maybe a little bit on what is in it for the businesses.
Businesses, there is a business case to be made for the security of tenure. It's true for all business everywhere. If you don't have security of property rights, no business is possible. You cannot transact, right? Contract enforcement and property. This is economics 101. For all business to function, security of property rights is paramount. What happens when forests are owned by and managed by governments and the forest departments on behalf of governments, but used by local people, is that rent seeking becomes paramount, and that we normally call it corruption. But from a business point of view, businesses have to pay a lot of rent to secure their supplies. It is the same as the farm bills and laws that have been passed recently in the last month. And there's been a lot of debate, there's been a lot of opposition. But the primary argument there is that farmers who own their land should be able to sell their produce to the highest bidder. And the current system of rent seeking that is embedded in the mandis is not allowing them to do that. We should extend the same argument to communities and forests so that local communities are able to extract greater value, but also do it in a way that does not destroy the forest.
Absolutely. I'm really, we've completely run out of time. I'm really sorry. We'll have to cut short our conversation. I know this is a super interesting topic, and there's so many dimensions to it that need probably will need hours at end to unravel and unpack. And we have a session planned on the 30th of October between 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. where we will be discussing the various aspects and bringing in a lot of different perspectives from different stakeholders to you. And we would like you and request you to mark your calendars, to pencil in the date and the time and join us for that session, which is being hosted by CRB and BIPPISB. So thank you so much. I'd like to thank Dr. Chhatre for such an illuminating discussion today, and certainly has got me thinking and has cleared some of my fundamentals on forest economy. We look forward to a more detailed discussion on the 30th. Thank you once again, and over to you, Shreya.
Thank you, Nandani, and thank you, Mr. Chhatre. It really was an insightful conversation. And just like Nandani said, please join us on the 30th of October, 2 p.m. To take forward this discussion. And we hope to have a lot more engaging conversations around this. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you very much. It was great. See you on the 30th.
Yes, thank you.